Hakadosh Boker Or Masechet Sotah Daf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph 41a1. So we already mentioned that the shiur is going to be Lilu Nishmat Shlomo Bar Yaakov Avraham Ben Gracia V'Shlomo Ben Tumam Ben Tumam Eliyahu Ben Rachel. And for Bezrat Hashem the Refuah Shlema Refuat HaNefesh V'Guf Shel Shlomo Ben Frecha V'Yivra Bat Sarah ונורית שקלים עדכם לימד אסתר, לא מן רחל חנם אליית וחנם בן פיבי, ושהקדוש ברוך הוא יפרפואה שלמען משמיים, אמן. We're going to start by the two dots on Mem Aleph Amud Aleph on the top, where it says that the Kohen Gadol is going to read on the parasha of Acharei Mot and Ach Be'asor. So he's going to come and he's going to read the Acharei Mot, which is the beginning of Acharei Mot, which is the entire concept of what? Is the entire concept of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, the Seder Avodah Yom Kippur, and then Ach Be'asor. So says now the Gemara, we have a contradiction. Medalgin banavi, ve'em medalgin b'Torah. What does that mean? The maftir, right? Somebody that's going to be maftir in the Navi, he's allowed to go from one parasha to another parasha, but you're not allowed to be medaleg in the Torah. So how could it be that you're going to go from the parasha of, right, of Acharei Mot to Ach Be'asor, which is not close to the Acharei Mot, so like not right afterwards, which means that even in a Tzever Torah of Sheni v'Chamishi, right, you're not, you don't have to, it's just enough 10 psukim for the 3 olim, you're not allowed to start skipping around from one parasha to another parasha. So the same thing, how could it be that he's going to come and he's going to start now going, right, and reading the entire concept of Ach Be'asor, and, right, because basically it's going to come out that it's further away. If you pay attention, one of them, the first part is Acharei Mot, is the beginning, the Rishon of Acharei Mot, right? That's what we actually do on Kippur as well in the morning. And then you have Ach Be'asor Lechodesh Shvi'i is in chapter 23. So the first one is Vayikra Tet Zayin, which is Vayikra 16. And then you're skipping to chapter 23, Pasuk Vav to Lamed Bet. So therefore, obviously, it's from one place to another place. What's going on exactly, right? So you're going from basically Acharei Mot to Emor. Right, but again, it's still you're jumping around. We know you're not allowed to jump around. I just said you're koftzim from Acharei Mot to Ach Be'asor to Parashat Emor. On the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol, when he's going to read on the Kippur, he's going to start with Acharei Mot and then he's medaleg to Ach Be'asor lechodesh shvi'i hazeh ta'anu nafshotechem. So now the question though is that how does he skip? You're not allowed to be skipping from the Torah, only in the Haftarah. So Amar Abaye comes and he answers. Like she asked a question. Kan bichtei shivso katurgeman, vekan bichtei shelo yivso katurgeman. Everything depends whether there's going to be a hefsek, a pasek. You heard, yeah, or not. What does that mean? Meaning, if right now, right before, right, he's actually changing around, right, the meturgeman is going to stop translating the last pasuk. So then emed dalgim Torah. Right? Why? Because you don't want that everyone's, it's like very awkward that everyone's just like, waiting and they're just waiting and waiting. What's going on? But he says, our Mishnah, we're talking about that you're allowed to skip even in the Torah is as long as the Meturgiman does not have time to stop, which means as long as the translator is still taking that time. And nowadays, by the way, the Temanim still do it. Temanim still do it that every single time that they read a pasuk, they read the Targum. So therefore, as long as the Targum is still being said, which means as long as they're still translating the pasuk, and if you have enough time there, which is very quick, you quickly, turn, right? It's not that far from Acharei Mot till Emor. It's not that far whatsoever. So as long as you're doing that, that's going to be permitted, and there's no problem whatsoever. So says the Gemara, V'ha'alak tani. But one second, I thought to do with this Mishnah Megillah. There it says Medalgim Navim Medalgim Torah. That kama Medalgim Akedesh Lo Yifsok Meturgiman Michlal the Torah Klal Uchlal Lo. Which means like this. I thought that you told me that you're not allowed to skip out in the Torah whatsoever. Rien. Shum davar. Nothing. Right? But in the Navi, you're allowed to. Now, the Mishnah there, the Gemara there is going to ask, how much can you skip around in the Navi? So the Gemara there answers, you could skip around until Shaliv Soka Meturgiman. Until the Meturgiman is not going to come and he's going to have enough time to translate the Pasuk. So one second. If that's written by the Navi, mashma, that by the Torah, you cannot skip it at all. Meaning this concept, this answer that you want to give, that as long as the Meturgeman is not keeping quiet, so therefore you're not doing Tircha de Tzibura, you're not doing Torah Tzibur, and there's no problem. He says that's incorrect because that's only by the Navi. Mashma, then in the Torah, you're not allowed to do nothing. You cannot do anything. Ela marabaye, but rather Abaye.
To skip.
Ela marabaye, but rather Abaye comes and he answers. La kashia. It's not a question. It says why? Kan binyan echad, v'kan b'shnei inyanim. The Mishnah which permits you to skip, even in the Torah, are talking about two parashiot that are talking about the same topic. So we're talking about Yom Kippur. And therefore you're allowed to be midaleg in the Torah. You're allowed to skip around in the Torah as long as the Meturgeman is not going to stop. So the Rishon of Acharei Mot, right, which is basically talking about the Avodah of Yom Kippur, yeah, and Ach be'asor lechodesh te'anu en mashotechem is also talking about Kippur. It's inyan echad, the same topic. As long as we're talking about the same topic, you're allowed to go from one place in the Torah to another place in the Torah, to skip around, to move around, as long as the Meturgeman does not have enough time. The Meturgeman is a translator, right? Targum, right? As long as the Meturgeman does not have time in order to stop, meaning as long as he's not stopping, you just finish the pasuk. You quickly scroll the Sefer Torah, right? And then you're on the next place. And then when he finishes, you're going to start Ach be'asor lechodesh. But when do we say that you could not skip around in the Torah? Mishnei inyanim, in two different topics. Meaning, even if I could come and I could scroll from one to another, right? And I won't finish, meaning the Turgiman will not finish. If it's two different topics, we don't skip around at all in Torah. So in the Torah, you're not allowed to skip around if it's going to be two topics. If it's one topic, you are allowed to skip around only as much that the Meturgeman is not going to stop. Okay, meaning that the Turgeman is still translating and you're scrolling. As long as you're doing that, that's going to be okay. If it's too long, you're not allowed to do that as well. Okay? Tanya, we learned in the Braita, right? This is now a Tanya lesiua, not bitmia. What does that mean? Many times the word Hatanya, right? Tanya, you know what Tanya is, yeah? Mm-hmm. So Tanya, sometimes it could be as a disproof, and sometimes it could be as a proof. So sometimes it says, how could you say that, Tanya, whatever it is? How could you say that, but it's written somewhere else? We learned in a Braita, A, B, C, D. So what are you talking about? But sometimes Tanya is a siua, right? And usually Rashi many times will bring it down, whether it's going to be when he's going to bring down the Tanya. Look in Rashi. Rashi says, Tanya benichuta. Meaning, instead of you thinking that it's a question that will be like bitmiya, like as a tmiya, like as a question, as a wonder, many times they'll bring you down. Benichuta. Benichuta means tranquility, tranquilo. You don't know, you're just doing it like, it's a proof. There's no questions here. Yeah, we don't ask questions. First we learn and we bring proofs. Afterwards we think about questions. Yeah, after you learned it 20 times, then we come and we start thinking. The Tanyas we learned in a Braita. Yeah, by minimum. Yeah, medalgim b'Torah b'inyan echad. Yeah, we're going to be medaleg b'Torah with one concept, with one topic. Ubenavi b'shnei inyanim. In the Navi, you could do it even in two different topics. Vekan, and both in the Torah or in the Navi. As long as the Turgaman is not going to stop. Ve'en, meaning that he's not going to stop translating. Ve'en medalgim l'Navi l'Navi, and you're not going to skip from one Navi to another Navi. Uvnavi shel shnei masar medalgim. That means you're not going to, that means even though we just said you're allowed to skip from one Navi to another Navi, you're not going to go from Shemuel to Melachim or Yoshua to Melachim. Or because that's already, you're going from one place, from one, that's like going from Shemot to Devarim. You understand? It's too much. You can't do that. You understand? So again, in the Torah, you're not allowed to do that anyway. But in the Navi, even though we just said that you're allowed to do this in the Navi, you can't go from one Navi to another Navi, right? Uvnavi shel shnei masar, and the Navi of and the Navi of Trei Asar medalgim, right? He says in the Navi of Trei Asar are the 12 prophets, right? If you actually pay attention to the Naviim, there's one Navi which is called Trei Asar. Trei Asar is 12. So each one you have, Yoel, Chagai, all these different Naviim that are in this one. So in that book, even though there are 12 different Naviim, since it's one book, so you're allowed to skip from one place to another place in the same Navi. Right? As long as you're not going to do it retroactively, you're going backwards. You're going from the end to the beginning. That you cannot do. Okay? Nekuda. Okay. We finished until the two dots. Next two dots. The two dots comes and it says, You're going to come and do gilila. Remember, the gilila is like the scrolling, right? And you're going to put it in your bosom, right? That's your chest area, as we already learned when we were learning English. So ask the Gemara, right? Why exactly does the Kohen Gadol, right? What does he have to come and like mention this? Like, because basically what happened is that he does a gilila, right? He puts it in his oil, and then he says to everybody, by the way, there's much more that's written here that I didn't say. Meaning, I only read to you a tip of the iceberg. There's much more written here. Why did he have to say that? Like, why does he have to start making announcements? You understand? So he says, "Shelo lo'otzi la'az al sefer Torah," not to be lo'otzi la'az on the sefer Torah, which means if they're going to come and they're going to see that he's reading the third parasha bal peh, because remember, how many parashiot is he reading? He's reading the first parasha of Acharemot, second parasha of Ach be'asor and Emor, third parasha of Pinchas. Pinchas. We're talking about the Maftid, right? The Maftid. Every Maftid is always going to be in Pinchas because that's going to be the concept of the Maftid. So therefore, if right now you're going to come, right, and you're going to bring this down of what? Of the Pinchas, that we said, how do you read Pinchas? Balpeh, you read it by heart. You don't read it from the scroll. Meaning, Acharemot and the more, you're going to read it inside there, right? Pinchas, right? You can't scroll all the way over there. Because even though it's talking about, again, Kippur, because that's obviously we're talking about, right? It doesn't help. It's too far away. Well, you're in the middle of Vayikra, and you're going to the middle of Bamidbar. So if you can't do that. So he says, if right now you're going to come and you're going to read it by heart, so people are going to come and say, you know what, 1 second. They're going to say, this Sefer Torah is Sefer Torah Pasul. Right? Why? Because Kilu, why is he reading it by heart? Well, what's going on here? So therefore, in order not to be motzi laz on the Sefer Torah, he has to make an announcement. The announcement is, by the way, you should know, right? Really, be'emet, there's much more written here, right? But I'm only reading to you this certain part. Then it says you're going to read be'asor shebechumash ha'pekudim koreh al peh, right? Then you're going to read the asor, right? Which is going to be again be'asor the chodesh on the 10th day of the month, which is the maftid in chumash ha'pekudim. Remember, what is chumash ha'pekudim? In which one's that? No, Bamidbar. Why? I told you. How do you call it Bamidbar in English? How do you call it? Numbers. Why is it called numbers? Pekudim. Chumash Pekudim. Yeah, you understand? So this is Chumash Pekudim. It's called numbers. Okay, so he comes and he says like this. He says, why don't you just come and be Gulel in the Sefer Torah to Parashat Pinechas Velikre and just read it inside? Answers the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna bar Yehuda Amar Rav Sheshet. Says Rav Huna bar Yehuda in the name of Rav Sheshet, Lefi she'en golelin Sefer Torah betzibur. You're not supposed to come and start rolling the Sefer Torah in the tzibur because of kavod tzibur. What does that mean?
We do that.
Which one?
We do in modern times.
We don't do it. Never. You never do it, right? You never do it. What does that mean? Right? Very simple. If I right now have to come and I have to scroll the Sefer Torah, do I wait for the tzibur and do it in the tzibur? No, you're not allowed.
If it's the wrong place.
The diavad.
If you put it out of the wrong place, you have no choice but to
the diavad, post fact, not lechatchila. Here we're talking about lechatchila because again, one more time, you're talking about the Kohen Gadol is here on Kippur. He's reading Acharemot. After Acharemot, he scrolled very quickly because it's right beside it to Emor, which is right afterwards, right? Acharemot Kedoshim and then Emor. So he does it very quickly. Now the Gemara asks, why don't you continue scrolling to what? To Pinechas in the middle of Bamidbar. He says, we don't do that lechatchila. Meaning, if you're right, sometimes people forget or they take out the wrong Sefer Torah. But for example, how many times does it happen, right? That Sami Maya comes and all of a sudden in the middle of Shachrit, he'll take out the Sefer Torah, right? He'll take out the Sefer Torah, and then what's he going to do? He's going to come and he's going to give it to him. What's going on? Why is it, right, that he's going to take it into the back room and he's going to do it here? The reason why is because lechatchila, you don't want to come and take it out and do it in the public. I mean, we only do that if we forgot, we took out the wrong Sefer Torah, there was a mistake, things like that. But lechatchila, right, we don't do that. Sometimes it happens that they took out the wrong Sefer Torah, they moved it, now you took it out again, you're like, hey, what's this going here? So you have to come, right, and you have to actually come and you have to, right, you have to do it. V'laiti Sefer Torah Harina Velikre. Yeah, he comes and he says, take out another Sefer Torah and read it. Yeah? Which means the Gemara is going to ask the question. Answers the Gemara, two different answers. Ravuna bar Yehuda amar mishum pgamo shel rishon. You know why? If you're going to come and take out another Sefer Torah, they're going to say this, the first Sefer Torah is pasul. Why are you taking another Sefer Torah? Well, the first one's pasul. Like, what's going on? So therefore, they don't want, because of the pagam of the first one. Number two, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish amar, lefi she'en mevarchin beracha she'ena tzricha. We don't want a beracha she'ena tzricha, which means if you're going to bring another Sefer Torah, he has to make another beracha on Birkat Torah. That's considered beracha she'ena tzricha, and therefore we don't want that, which means like this. What? It's not the middle of the same kriya. One is the maftir kilu, the ach basor, and one is the before. So basically like this. If you remember, in the olden days, what they used to do was, right, they used to do one bracha at the beginning and one bracha at the end. So the first person that got the first aliyah will make a bracha at the beginning, the first bracha, Shabbat Rabanu, and the last person of the aliyot will make Asher Natan Lanu, the last. Right, mamash, it was like that. The first person made the first bracha, last person made the last bracha. Afterwards, we came and we made the institution that every single person that gets up to the Torah comes, right, and makes a bracha. Now he comes and he says like this. One second. So he comes and he says like this. If right now, right, you're going to come and take another Sefer Torah, you would have to make a new bracha. Right, according to everybody, it's a new Sefer Torah. That's like coming and you're going to bring a new piece of food. You have to make a new bracha. So what happens? Now what happens is he says that's going to be a bracha shenetzich. It's not bracha l'batalah because at the end of the day, it's not l'batalah. It's on the Sefer Torah, but it's a shenetzich. You don't need it. Right? Why don't you need it? Because you already said chovah. What are you doing now? You're coming and making another bracha. So in order not to make a bracha shenetzich, we do not do such a thing. Okay, that's what the Gemara is saying. So two different reasons. When we do says the Gemara, are you going to suspect for a defect? Takilu, to say that the first Sefer Torah is pagum? The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, says Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Rosh Chodesh Tevet shechal yot b'Shabbat, mevi shalosh Torot. When you have Rosh Chodesh Tevet that falls out on Shabbat, how many Sefer Torahs do you take out? 3. How many times do you take out 3 Sifrei Torah?
איפה, מתי?
ראש חודש,
Couple times a year.
שבת, ראש חודש ופרשה של אותו דבר. מה שיש.
מתי שאלת או...
Yes, when?
שבת, ראש חודש, ופרשה של אותו אירוע, של מה שיש.
מתי?
שבת, ראש חודש שלנו.
One of them is Chanukah. Yeah, one of them is Chanukah. When else? Simchat Torah.
ויש לך עוד אחד?
Simchat Torah, you take 3 ספרים. וזאת הברכה, בראשית, מפטיר. No, Kippur, no.
Oh, you just go back. There's another time in the summer, like
There's another 2 times that you take out, but it doesn't happen every single year. By the way, all these 3 don't happen every single year. Sometimes you could only have 1. Sometimes one you always have Simchat Torah, but sometimes you could have 1 other. Sometimes you could have 2. Sometimes you could have 3. It all depends.
one time where you can have
Right?
4, right?
No, doesn't exist.
No.
Yeah, one more time. You have 3 times Simchat Torah, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and Shabbat. Because one for Shabbat, one for Rosh Chodesh, and one for Chanukah. Rosh Chodesh, yeah, and Shabbat, and Adar, and which is Shekalim. Right? Shekalim, right, is always usually the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh, but if it comes out on Shabbat, it's that same Shabbat. So you have Shabbat of Rosh Chodesh, you have Rosh Chodesh, and Parashat Shekalim, which is Kitisa. The next one is Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, HaChodesh, meaning Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when it comes out on Shabbat, so that you read Shabbat, the Parashat of the Shabbat, you read the Rosh Chodesh, and you're going to read Parashat HaChodesh, which is in Parashat Bo. So those are 3 times in the year, right? Besides Simchat Torah, because you had Simchat Torah, which is always 3, Bezot Beracha, Bereshit, 2 different Sifrei Torah, and the Maftir. And then you have another 3 times in the year that you could have 3 Sifrei Torah, but it doesn't always happen, right? Fine. No, because not always does Rosh Chodesh fall on Shabbat. Yeah? So he says over here.
There's only one affixed here.
So the Gemara said, Rosh Chodesh Tevet, shechal yot b'Shabbat, מביא 3 תורות. You bring 3 ספרי תורה, וקורא אחת מעניינו של יום. So one is פרשת השבוע, עניינו של יום. One of them is Rosh Chodesh, and one of them is going to be Chanukah. So you have 3. Okay? So now the question is, 1 second. We're not going to say that the first Sifrei Torah are Pagum. So if you could take out 3 Sifrei Torah and you're not saying that one of them is Pagum, right? Why are you coming and telling me that if he's going to take out a second Sefer Torah, it is Pagum? So the truth is, it's very interesting. Why are you going to the extreme? You're going from 1 to 3. Just go 1 to 2. right? Just say Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. You take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Say Shabbat and Zachor, right? Right? Can you ever have Shabbat Zachor with 3 Sefarim? With 3 Sefarim. Can you ever have it?
So you're going to need to have a Rosh Chodesh on.
Exactly, it's impossible because Zachor is right before or Shabbat Parah can never have 3 Sefarim, right? Because it's always right after the one of the thing or the one before a Chodesh. So you'll never have 3 Sefarim.
Before,
Yeah, Purim. Yeah. So therefore, he comes and he says, "Tlata gavre betlata sifre lekapagama." He comes and he says, when you have 3 people reading from 3 Sifrei Torah, that's not a pagam, because each person is reading from his own Sefer Torah. Chad gavra betri sifre ipagama. But if you're going to have one person reading in the 2 different Sifrei Torah, or even whatever it is, right, in 2 Sifrei Torah, it's going to be a pagam, which means like this. Here, it's the same one that's reading it. It's the Kohen Gadol. He's the same person. So if he's reading from 2 Sifrei Torahs, you're going to say, the first Sefer Torah is pagum. That's why there's a whole question. Can a person that got aliyah during the first Sefer Torah get an aliyah for the maftir? Let's say, for example, we come and I give, right, David an aliyah. And all of a sudden I come and I say, you know what, 1 second, we don't have anybody to read Haftarah. Can I give him an aliyah again on a second Sefer Torah? If it's on the same Sefer Torah, it's much easier. Because then you can't say that the same Sefer Torah has a gam, because I'm calling him up again. So obviously it means that we don't have somebody to read Haftarah. So we're calling him up. However, but then why are you calling him up again in the same Sefer Torah? Right? But he comes and he says, right, but if it's going to be in a second Sefer Torah, maybe I'm going to say that the first Sefer Torah is pagum. So it's even much worse. So here he comes and he says, one person in 2 Sifrei Torahs is a pagam. 3 people in 3 Sifrei Torah is not a pagam. So he comes and he says like this, right? You're always welcome. Yeah, you're going to make 8 berachot. Remember that the Kohen Gadol is going to make 8 blessings on that day. You make a bracha on the Torah, just like you're going to make a bracha in the Bet Knesset, which is Shanatalanu Torah Tamet. Everything just like we do the Nusach that we mentioned. Ala Mikdash b'fnei atzmo on the Bet Hamikdash, Ala Kohanim b'fnei atzmam and on the Kohanim, Val Yisrael b'fnei atzmam and on the Israelim, Val Yisrael b'fnei atzmam, which means like this. If you remember yesterday when we were talking about the entire concept of the berachot, each one was a specific bracha that was brought down in the Mishnah, where you're making a bracha for the Kohanim, you're making a bracha for the Israelim, you're making a bracha, each one gets their own bracha. Ve'ashar tefillah, and the rest of the tefillah. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned it right. Hashar tefillah techina, rina ubakasha, shamecha Yisrael tzechim livasha. That your nation Yisrael, they have to be saved. Okay, remember that tefillah, techina, all of them are different types of tefillah is the prayers, techina is supplications, rina is songs, bakasha is your pleading, you're asking for things. Ve'chotem, and you finish shomea tefillah. From then onwards, each person is going to bring a Sefer Torah from his own house to the Azara, and he starts reading it. So why do they do that? In order to show the beauty of the Sefer Torah to all the people, to the public. And that's where we're actually coming. We're doing that, right? Because so therefore you have to come. It means you have to beautify mitzvot. In order to beautify mitzvot, we come and we're going to bring them. It means everyone comes, they bring Sefer Torah to the thing. Beautiful Sefer Torah. They're all coming to the Azara in order to start learning. Why? To show the beauty of the mitzvot. When a person has a mitzvah, you're supposed to beautify a mitzvah. Some people, they know how to beautify, right? Whether it's going to be their cars, their this, that. That's why they say that the Bizat Mitzrayim, right? The Biza Layam was much greater than Bizat Mitzrayim. Why? In Bizat Mitzrayim, right? How much jewelry, how much things do you have in your house? But Biza Layam was on their horses. Imagine how much jewelry they put on their horses. Right? What do you think of Rolls Royces? You're putting more jewelry on the car than what you have in your house, right? But you are coming. So the same thing. And the Yam, right? They came and they had so much of jewelry and diamonds and this and that, all these things. They actually ask, right? 1 second, where did that jewelry come from? At the end of the day, we know by Natslu Mitzrayim, they emptied out Egypt. So where did that jewelry come from? Paro had to be midarbenotam. He had to come, he had to enthusiast. He had to make them. He went and he said, you guys, you know what? Run after the Jews. Who's going to run after the Jews? They just emptied the now. What are you going to run after the Jews? He says, come into my storage houses. Everything that I have in my storage house of gold, silver, you take it and you put on your horses. You go out to war. When you come back, you keep it. That's why you got everyone to go out. They all went to war. They all went to war. Everybody. You were just pounded. 10 makot. Every house had a dead guy. They saw the money. They were blinded. They went running. And that's when they died, the Bnei Yisrael took out of Vizat Yam. What they were, the booty that came from the Yam, the Yamsuf, was much greater than what Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, every single guy went to their house. Big deal. It was the Bizat Hayam had everything that Paro had. Everything went out. Everything was emptied out. Something incredible. Okay, fine. Parashat
We
HaMelech.
just had the jewelry on the carriage.
Exactly.
In Charles 2 days ago.
So you have it. There you go. You
Yeah,
just
they
had
were
it.
Malchut.
Yeah, Malchut. So you have all the jewelry. They said it was so heavy with jewels that his neck is hurting. What do you want? Fine, let's go. Parashat HaMelech. Keitzad. Yeah, he comes and he says, how do you do Parashat HaMelech? Right? How do you read Parashat HaMelech? Remember, until now we spoke about Parashat the Kohen Gadol. Now we're talking about Parashat HaMelech. במוצאי יום טוב הראשון של חג בשמיני, במוצאי שביעית, right? עושים בימה של עץ בעזרה. So, במוצאי יום טוב האחרון של חג, right? Which is מוצאי יום טוב האב. What is חג? סוכות. בשמיני, the 8th day, מוצאי שביעית. It has to be on מוצאי שביעית, which means after שנת השמיטה. After the year Shemitah, like this year, by the way. This year was Shnat Shemitah, was last year. So this year was Hakel. That's the concept of Hakel. Osin lo bima shel etz v'azera. They make for the king a bima. Right? What is the bima? The teva that we talk about, right? The bima. Ashkenazim actually call it until today bima. Bima shel etz, of wood, ba'azera and azera. Hu yoshev alea, and he sits on it. Shneimar mikeh sheva shanim b'moed, Shnat Shemitah, v'chazukot. They're all v'tikah. He's going to read this. Chazan HaKnesset, the shamash of the Bet Knesset. Notel Sefer Torah is going to take the Sefer Torah. He's going to give it to the head of the Knesset. The Rosh Knesset notanal Sgan. He's going to come and give it to the Sgan Kohen Gadol. The Sgan notanal Kohen Gadol. The Sgan is going to give it to the deputy Kohen Gadol. Gives it to the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol notanal Melech. He gives it to the king. The Melech omen kabel. The king stands up and he receives it from the Kohen Gadol. The Koreh Yoshev, and he reads it sitting down. So when he receives it, he's standing up and then he sits down and he's going to read from the parasha. Agrippa Melech. Amad ve'kibel, Agrippa the king, he actually stood up and received from the Kohen Gadol, the Kara Omed, and he actually went and he read it standing up. The Shivhu Chachamim. The Chachamim came and they praised him. Once it came to Lo tuchal latet alecha ish nochri, you're not allowed to put a person, right, that he's not from your brothers, because basically what happened is that he was from Hurdus. So he was actually a goy, he wasn't a Jew. So all of a sudden, Zalgu and Avdmaot. Right? He comes and he says, he started crying. They went and they said, Amrulo, they told him, Al titira, don't be afraid. Achinwata, you're a brother. Which means he was the king, but he was actually converted. He was not a Jew. He's not allowed to be a king. A convert cannot be a king. It has to be a Jew. Right? It says in the Pasuk says, Lo tuchal latet alecha ish nochri asher lo achicho. You're not allowed to put a stranger that's not from your brothers. So now all of a sudden he started crying because he was realizing that what? That he cannot be king. So they went and they told him, don't worry about it. Don't worry. You're a brother. We're going to see what the punishment was for them flattering him when it was not the proper place to flatter him. Because at the end of the day, he's a goy, right? He comes from non-Jewish blood and therefore he cannot come and he cannot be the king, right? So he comes and he says, he's going to read from the beginning of Ele Devarim. Right? So he's going to start from the beginning of Devarim until Parashat Shema. Right, and he's going to do Parashat Shema. He's going to skip until Vayayim Shamua. Right, so he's going from Vayitchanan to Ekev. Then he's going to skip to Aser Te'aser, which is the Parashat Re'eh. Right, Ki Techalel Aser. And then he goes to Parashat HaMelech, right, which is talking about Shoftim Shotrim, the entire concept of how you're supposed to, the judging and all these things. Brachot Uklalot. Then he skips back to the Brachot Uklalot in Kitavo. Ad Shegomeh Kol Parasha until he finishes the Parasha. So it's very interesting the way that he's doing Devarim. He's like skipping around. They said he does the beginning until Shema, he reads Shema, skips to Vayayim Shamua, skips and afterwards to Aser Ta'aser, right? What we read on Yamim Tovim, we just read it on Pesach, right? Or the truth, not on Pesach, but we started Kol HaBechor. Aser Ta'aser is when Shabbat comes out on the Yom Tov Sheni, right? Which means that, for example, if Pesach would come out, or for example, Shavuot, if the second day of Shavuot, for the first day of Shavuot, we read Yitro. Second day of Shavuot, you read Kol HaBechor. But if it comes out on Shabbat, you read Aser Ta'aser. Same thing on the 8th day of Pesach, or the same thing on the Shemini Atzeret. So he comes and he says like this. He says, Berachot, right? Berachot shekohen gadol mevarech otan, melech mevarech otan. The same blessings that the Kohen Gadol makes, so too the king makes. Ela shenoten shel regalim tachat mechilat avon. But instead of mechilat avon, which is obviously going to be only for Kippur, they're going to do the one of shalosh regalim, which is the tabeh hartanu, and you're going to finish off mekadesh yisrael v'zemanim instead of mekadesh, right? Melech solech lavonotenu lavonot hamu yisrael. Right? Okay, fine. Says the Gemara, Bashmini salkadaitach. Are you going to tell me now that the kavanah is on Yom HaShemini of Sukkot? Right? You just told me Motzei Yom Tov HaRishon, which is going to be the Motzei Yom Tov HaRishon, which is going to be on the second day of Sukkot. basically the second day of Sukkot. That's when you're doing. You're not doing the 8th day. So he says, right? Ema bashminit. He says no, b'motzei shnat hashmita, which is the 8th year. Okay. So he says v'chol hani lamali. So why be'emet do we need all these simanim? Because you just told me when it finishes Shemitah, which is the 8th year. Then you told me b'moed, v'chag Sukkot. Then you told me miketz hashanim. Why do you need all this? So he says tzricha, you need it. Why do you need it? Di'ikatav rachmana miketz sheva shanim. As if the Torah would have written at the end of 7 years, miketz sheva shanim. Hava mina, I would have thought to say, nimne mihashta, you count it from now 7 years. Meaning from the 40 years of Yetziat Mitzrayim, you're going to, it said the mitzvah, so now you count the 7 years. Even though it's not going to come out to Shemitah from now. Okay? Because obviously it's only going to be only after 14 years afterwards. Right? After, because they only started after the conquering of Eretz Yisrael. That's when they started the Shemitah. So Katav Rachmana, that's why the Torah writes Shnata Shemitah. It has to be Shemitah. Right? It's a Motzei Shemitah. Right? Katav Rachmana Shemitah. If it was only written Shemitah, Havamina Beso Shemitah, I would have thought to say at the end of Shemitah, before Rosh Hashanah. Because after the Shemitah, meaning after it's already after Shemitah. So you have to write down Miketz Sheva Shanim, meaning afterwards. Katav Rachmana, that's why it says B'moed. Right? B'moed means, right? V'ikatav B'moed, Havamina Mineshata. I would have thought to say Rosh Hashanah is a Moed. But it's also called the Moed, meaning the Chagim, right? Rosh Hashanah is a Moed. Because so Katav Rachmana, Chag HaSukkot, that's why I had to say Chag HaSukkot. V'ikatav Rachmana Chag HaSukkot, if it was only written Chag HaSukkot, Havamina would have thought to say Afilu Yom Tov Acharon, even in Shmini Atzeret. So Katav Rachmana, that's why the Torah says Bevochol Yisrael, when all of Israel is actually here, right? Which is when Me'atchalta the Moed, from the beginning of the Moed, Me'malef Amubet, yeah, 41b. Okay, Me'atchalta the Moed, right at the beginning of the Moed. Fine, 2 dots. Me'malef Amubet, 41b. It says like this. It says in the 2 dots, Chazan HaKnesset notel sever Torah v'notno leRosh HaKnesset. So remember, the Chazan comes, he's going to take the Sefer Torah, gives it to the Rosh HaKnesset. The Rosh HaKnesset gives it to the Sgan, to the Deputy Kohen Gadol, Deputy Kohen Gadol gives it to the Kohen Gadol, and then Kohen Gadol gives it to the king. That's the order. Shematmi, now we learn from here, Cholkin Kavod leTalmid b'mkom Rav. You're going to give Kavod to the Talmid in front of the Rav. Meaning, the Talmid comes and he gives it to his rabbi. His rabbi is going to give his rabbi. That means you're giving Kavod to each person, even though he's a big rabbi. So for example, let's say I have my rabbi in front of me. And you give me kavod, that means you're giving me kavod in front of my rabbi. And I have to give kavod to my rabbi. Do you do that or not? So here it's mashma that you do. Because the Chazan HaKnesset, he gives it to his superior. His superior, which is the Rosh HaKnesset, gives it to the Skan Kohen Gadol. The Skan Kohen Gadol gives it to his superior, which is the Kohen Gadol. And then the Kohen Gadol gives it to his superior, which is the king. So do you do that or not? This is not a proof to yes or no. This is all giving kavod to the king. Because by you coming and giving so many people in line, you're actually showing, look how much kavod does the king actually get. So it's not that you're actually giving the kavod to the superiors, you're giving kavod to the king to show, look how high up he is on the chart, right? On the pyramid. Okay, fine. So the king, he stands up, he receives the Sefer Torah, and then he sits. He stood up and he received it and he read, standing. Omed miklad yoshev. He says what? What does it mean standing? So it's mashma that until now, he was sitting. He says 1 second. The only ones that they could actually sit down in the Azara is only Malchut Bet David and not Malchut Chashmonai. Right? This is Malchut Chashmonai. And it's not even Chashmonai. Because remember, Hordus, he killed out all the Chashmonai. Right? Herod, right, that's his name in English, right? Hordus, he came and he killed out all the Chashmonaim. That's why they said, if anybody's going to ever say that they're Chashmonaim, he's an Eved. He's a slave. He's not a Chashmonai. Right?
Was not Jewish.
He wasn't. He wasn't Jewish. He converted.
He read the Torah in the Azara.
He read the Torah in the Azara, and then obviously he started crying because he actually said that he realized that he's not allowed to be king. Right? But again, he forced himself to be king. Right? So Agrippa HaMelech.
He forced himself.
Yeah. So 1 second. And this is the Chashmonaim. Remember, the Chashmonaim themselves were Kohanim. They were Malchut Bet David. So even they themselves would not sit down. So what's going on over here? So how could it be somebody else then? So Kedam Rav Chasta, like Rav Chasta answers, it's Ba'azarat Nashim. It's in the Azarat Nashim. It's not in the regular Azarat. It's Azarat Nashim. Hachanam is that means in the Azarat Nashim you're allowed to sit down. So therefore they were doing it in the Azarat Nashim. They weren't doing it in the Azarat. You're right. In the regular Azarat you're not allowed to sit down. It could only be Malchut Bet David. Here they were in the Azarat Nashim. The Azarat Nashim was the outside box. You remember? We're talking about the outside boxes. Azarat Nashim was where everybody used to go. No, there was a certain, whether it's a second floor or whatever, but that was called the Azarat Nashim, where even women were allowed to come into. Then you had the Azarat Yisrael, and then you had the Azarat Kohanim, right? When it was further in the second boxes, right? Fine. Shibchu Chachamim. So the rabbis went and they praised him. Shibchu Mikad Shapi Rava. What? He did something good. Hamar Ravashi Afilu Mandamar Vina according to Mandamar Nasi Shmachal Kvodo Kvodo Machul. Mela Shavachal En Kvodo Machul. What are you talking about? Even if a Nasi is allowed to come and forgive, a king is not allowed to forgive. A king is not allowed to forgive. Right? He says, which means like this. Sometimes you could forgive your rights. A father could come and tell his son, you know what, okay, sit down, or you don't have to sit down, you don't have to stand up every single time for me, or things like that. And said, you could be mochel al kvodo. A kohen could be mochel al kvodo. You could say, you know what, go, let somebody else take my aliyah. You could be mochel. A king is a sur for him to be mochel al kvodo. He's not allowed to. Why? If he's mochel al kvodo, people are not afraid of him. Because they're going to say, no, don't worry about it, he's not makpid. No. This king, he doesn't mochel at all. There's no such thing as no makpid. He has to be strict in everything. So everyone's afraid of him. They have to come and they have to zrok maraba talmidim, right? That's what Rabbi always used to say. Rabbi used to be very, very strong, right? He was, sometimes when he was strict, don't get close to him. He could be the nicest guy, come, slap you in the face. But if you would cut heads. There's nothing what to joke around. Why? You say, zrok maraba talmidim. It's Gemara Mefureshet. You have to throw, right? You have to throw into them the fear. Why? If they don't fear you, they will never respect and they will never learn Torah. Right? They have to have that. A melech, right, is the exact same thing. A melech has to be that he's not allowed to forgive. So how's he being forgiving? Here, if he's standing up, it's meaning he's being muchel kavodo. His kavod is that he has to be sitting down and reading the Torah. How's he standing up? So answers the Gemara, mitzvah shane. For a mitzvah, he's allowed to be muchel kavodo. Meaning, for me and you, or for anybody, he cannot be mochel kvodo because he has to be very strict with his midot. But to do the mitzvah, he's allowed to be mochel kvodo. So now 1 second. When he came to the pasuk that you're not allowed to place a person that's not Jewish to become the king, he started crying. Tana mishmed Rabbi Natan, they taught, ve'ota sha'a nitchayvu sonei Yisrael klaya shechnifu lo la'akripas. In that moment, that they flattered Akripas HaMelech, and they said, don't worry, you're a brother. Sonei Yisrael, we know that's euphemism. It doesn't really mean the enemy of Yisrael, it means Yisrael. They were obligated klaya to be destroyed because they came and they flattered Akripas HaMelech. You're never allowed to flatter if it's not correct. Meaning, if somebody's doing something wrong, you're not supposed to flatter because it's not something good, right? It's true, they were afraid, this, that. But let's see what he says. It says, once they came, right, and they started flattering Akripas HaMelech, nit'avetu adinim. The dayanim came and they were machnifin l'baalei adin. Nitkalkelu ha'ma'asim. The actions went off. En adam yachol lomar lechavero ma'asai gedolim ma'asecha. My actions, meaning that you couldn't even, because they weren't mocheh, they didn't rebuke. The ones which are doing averah, people started learning that people, they do averah, they do biyad ramah, they could do with their hands up, they could do whatever they want, and a kidu, you can't say anything. There's nothing what to do. The Rash of Yehuda bar Marava, right? So Rabbi Yehuda bar Marava, he expounded, so he comes and he says, 1 second, but you are allowed to come and be machnif l'shaim in this world. From this pasuk, we're learning that you're not allowed to be machnif l'shaim during the time of Mashiach. Miklal, to ba'olam hazeh shari. So 1 second. If during the time of the Mashiach you're not allowed to do it, mashma that now you are allowed to do it, then you're right. During the time of Mashiach, don't do it. But here, now you're allowed to be machnif l'shaim. Right? Rabbi Shimon Malakish Amar Me'ach, another pasuk. Kirot penei Elohim v'titzeni. Yaakov vin. We came to Esav. What did he tell Esav? Kirot penei. I want to see you like I'm seeing the face of God. Some of you should accept it. Well, when you're flattering the Rasha, right? So says the Gemara, no. But this is arguing. Upliga Rabbi Shimon Malakish is arguing on Rabbi Levi. But says Rabbi Levi, Mashal shel Yaakov v'Esav. What is the case of Yaakov and Esav? He comes and he says the case of Yaakov and Esav l'adam shezimen echavero v'yikin bo. Imagine right now you invite somebody to your house and you realize he wants to kill you. Amarlo, he says, here, taste this because this is like the taste that you'll have in the house of the king. Amar, he comes and he says, Yadele Malka? Why, you know the king? What's going on? So he's going to be afraid he won't kill him. Meaning he comes and he says, by the way, I'm serving you this food, the food that I just tasted in the house of the king. He says, what? You know the king? Yeah. I was just there. He's going to kill him. The king knows. He's not going. Meaning that was Yaakov and Esav. I mean, don't bring me a proof from Yaakov that he flattered Esav. He did it purposely. Because he says, I'm looking in your face, Kilu, like just like I saw Hashem. Why was he saying that? Not to say that you're God. To come and say, I see Hashem panim el panim. I want to see your face. He's going to say, he's getting afraid. That was the mashal with Yaakov and Esav. Amar Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Kol adam sheyesh bo charufa mevi af laolam. Anybody that comes and he starts flattering people, he brings anger, wrath to the world. Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, vechanfe lev yasimu af. The ones that they come and they start flattering, they're going to place wrath in the world. And not only that, and tfilato nishmat. His tefillah is not listened to. Shneimar says in the pasuk, lo yeshaveu ki asaram. Okay, so therefore again, you're not going to be listened to. So this is very, very powerful. Siman. Afu bar geinam biyado nida gola. Remember mnemonics. Remember, whenever we're learning mnemonics, you start remembering, right, what the order of the Gemara is, what we're talking about. And they used to do mnemonics, right, all the time. Capish? I just did one actually yesterday, right, when we were learning, the Ben Ish Chai has an entire sefer on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, what to learn on the night of Lag BaOmer, right? That it starts from the beginning and it continues going. And there's beautiful Gemarot. It starts with Gemarot, then Midrashim, then it goes to Zohar. It could probably take you the entire night and even more, because it's just Zohar Chadash. It brings on Zohar of Bereshit, Shemo, Vayika, then it's Zohar Chadash. Incredible stuff. So in one of them, right, I saw the famous Gemara, Raiti Bnei Aliyah vehem muatim. Shimon Bar Yochai comes and he says, right, I saw people that they're growing, but there are very few people. Meaning when you come and you see a Bet Knesset, right, you want to see who is Bnei Aliyah. Bnei Aliyah are people that are growing. So you think that everyone's growing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes and he says, Raiti Bnei Aliyah vehem muatim, there are very few of them. But he says one thing, if they're going to be, right, 10, whatever it is, Ani ubni mehem, I myself, or me and my son were there. There's going to be 2 of them. Me and my son are going to be there. Even if there's going to be 1, I'm going to be there. Meaning that he's always a Bnei Aliyah. He's always somebody that's growing. Because that's where a person always has to actually come and to achieve. To be ole, a lot of people could start going up the mountain. The secret is staying there and continue always rising. So he says, how do you know where this Gemara is? It's a Gemara Masechet Sotah. So I went and I did, very simple. You know how? Aliyah. Lamed Yud Hey, right? What is Lamed?
It's 45.
45, Daf Mem Hey. Masechet Sotah, Daf Mem Hey, that's where it says, Ra'iti b'nei aliyah v'hen muatim. You make yourself a siman, to remember, a mnemonic, to remember. How do you remember? Where it is. Kol kvuda b'melech penima. Right? When we're always going to say that the princesses, the Jewish girls, they're princesses. How do you know where it is in Perek of Tehillim? Perek Mem Hey, Penima, Mem Hey. Penima, you come, you make yourself a mnemonic, you always remember, right, where it is. Right, that your wife, this is a Perek of Tehillim that you say by Brit Milah or by Zeved Bat. What Perek of Tehillim is it? Kuf Kafchet, 128. How do you know? Right? You do Eshtecha. Kaf is 20. Aleph is 1. Shin is like 3, right? Because it's Mispar Katan. And Taf is 4, 28. So you remember it's Kuf Kafchet, 128. Eshtecha. You make for yourself mnemonics, and by doing that, you remember everything that you're learning. Okay? So he comes and he says like this. He says the mnemonic. Says Rabbi Elazar, Kol adam sheyesh lo chanufa, afilu ibarin shebemei iman mekalelin oto. Even the fetuses in the mother's wombs, they're cursing him out. They're coming, they're saying to the Rasha that he's a tzaddik. יקרבו עמים זמור לעמים, ואין קורא אצל הכללה, שנאמר, לא כבועל ואין לאום, who is the לאום? עוברין, שנאמר, ולאום מלא מימץ. They were talking about Yaakov and Esav when they were in the stomach, the fetuses, ולאום מלא מימץ. So that's the uber. Even the ubarim, the fetuses, are cursing him out because he's flattering. ואמר רבי אלעזר, says רבי אלעזר, כל אדם שיש בו חנופה נופל בגיהינם. So anybody that goes, he's going to have what? Geinam. Why does he say Geinam? He falls in Geinam. Shneimar, Hoya Omrin la Ra. Right? Tov, vela Tov Ra. Woe to the people that are saying good is bad, bad is good. מה כתיב אחר? What does it say? אכן ככל קש לשון אש וחשש להווה ייפה. ששם כמה, what does it say? The onish of the Hanafim is the ash of Geinam. אמר רבי אלעזר, so that was Geinam. Next one, ואמר רבי אלעזר, כל המחניף לחברו סוף נופל בידו. If you come and you praise your friend, you fall into their hands. And that means you're going to fall into their hands. That now, Kilo, you need them. He says, but if you don't fall into their hands, you're going to fall into the hands of his children. And if it's not going to be into his children, it's going to be his grandchildren. So therefore he comes and he says, he's bringing pasuk, and it's written, בעל פקידת ושמו יריה בן שמיה בן חניה, מפוסק בן לאמור, אל הכסדים אתה נופל, ויאמר ירמיהו שקר, אינני נופל אל הכסדים, וכתיב ויפוס יריה בירמיהו והביאו לשרים, which means that they actually came, and Yirmiyahu was there ימים רבים. So Yirmiyahu fell into the hands of Ben Beno, to the grandson of Hananiah Nevi HaSheker. Why? Because he went, and a few days before he praised him, so he didn't fall into his hands, and not into his son's hands, he fell into the grandson's hands because he went and he was over on Chanufah. You want to finish the perek?
No.
Yeah? Fine. So we continue with Hashem tomorrow.